Nathan Beverly, and welcome to Call for Salt. I'm back, and I want to do this one episode here on questions that have just been burning in my mind, burning in my heart, within just a cumulative effect of events that have built up in the last years and just in the last few weeks of news cycles. And I just have some questions for my fellow Christians, for my fellow churchgoers, Christians, those that claim the name of Christ. Hopefully these can really make you think, make you consider about where you're at, where we're at as a nation, where your family's at. As you can tell, the title of my subject today is pretty serious, pretty sobering. And I don't mean to be overly dramatic. I really believe this to be true. I believe that our families are in jeopardy. I believe that where we're at right now as a country is a very perilous time. Is just very sensitive. There's a lot of things that could just set off a powder keg. And again, I don't want to be over dramatic, but I want to ask you some questions. And there's one word that I think that we all need to look at in a different light. We all need to take off the dirty word category in our mind. See, we as people, I just think as individuals, as people, as Christians, we want to be people of peace. We want to have peace. We want to have unity. But I believe that we're selling out for a fake unity. I should say, it's a sincere unity in a lot of ways, but it's a surface unity. And we are ignoring just this enemy, this volcano that's right under the surface that's ready to erupt. And what are we doing about it? Are we ignoring it? Are we going to just hold hands and have peace while this thing erupts around us, erupts underneath us? Those are some of the questions that I have, and I want to get to some of the specifics of those questions. Why I believe this affects your family. Why I believe this is going to affect many of our families. I'm not talking about just way extended families. I'm talking about even possibly our own immediate families. When will it matter to stand on the truth, even if we have to divide? See, unity, superficial unity, matters very little, if at all, if we are not united on the truth. The truth is what we need, is all that matters. The truth is all that matters. If there is one truth that will be good for people and be good for a nation and be good for families and be good for our family and is going to be the best by far, we need to unite on that truth. What is that word? You might have guessed it already, but that word is politics. When did the word politics become such a dirty word? You know, we talk about the two things that we don't, when we go to our family Thanksgivings. I've heard this from many different people. When we go to our family Thanksgivings or when we go to a family holiday and we have a meal, the two things we don't talk about, what are they? Religion and politics. Because politics for some reason it divides, and people have strong opinions on it. And so because of that, and because we've seen there is a dirty aspect to politics. Absolutely, there's corruption. Power corrupts, right? Money corrupts. And in any government, you're going to see corruption. But that word has become so dirty that we would rather bury our heads in the sand and not do anything, or say, oh, well, God is in control, I'm not going to worry about it, as Christians. And it's not worth dividing with my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ when we are we're becoming more and more at polar opposites of the spectrum on politics. And why is politics, why is it valuable? Why is it important? You know, unfortunately, in our day, in a sinful world, we have to have politics, we have to have government, we have to have the rule of law, right? We're not going to just operate in peace automatically. Civilization is not going to just be there and just be how we want it to be a safe place for our families to grow and to prosper. Politics has to rule that, and politics decides how we live our lives. It decides how our family lives our lives. Now, there's corrupt politicians, but when it comes right down to it, those politicians, they vote on laws, and those laws get enacted, and they get enforced, and we have to obey them, or we have to resist. And if it comes to a point where we have to obey God over man, we're going to have to resist. And if it comes to a point where our families will be affected, they're going to be affected. It's not just politics anymore, is it? When it gets real, when it starts affecting our families, that's when we start to pay attention. That's when we start to say, oh, it's not just this far-off, corrupt thing called politics that I really don't want to have anything to do with. It's not just, something we shouldn't talk about anymore. No, it's something very real. And it's becoming something that Christians don't want to talk about, but everybody else is talking about it. Everybody, the left, those that would do our people, our country, and our families harm, that have a very real agenda to destroy this country as we know it, they're not going to stop caring about politics. They're not going to stop. And it's time that we as Christians, we take our place and we get in line. We fall in place where we're supposed to be. We claim the rights that we have as American citizens, the responsibility that we have before God to stand up, to speak out, to use our First Amendment rights while we still have them, to vote, to act like this matters, because it does. Our families, our very families are at stake. So here's some questions for you I want you to consider. Do you believe that there is an evil agenda, and it's being from the left, in some sense, whether it's communism, socialism, whatever? Do you believe that there's an evil agenda that wants to fundamentally change and make this country very different than the America that we know, and that is implementing that agenda before our eyes in this administration? Do you believe that? I think you'd have to be living on Mars for the last couple years to not at least suspect that. I mean, you see where we've come as a nation with this last presidency. You see, what do you think about these issues? Look at the open border. Look at everything that President Trump put into place to build walls and to have tough border policies and all of these things, the Remain in Mexico policy, all of these things, ending catch and release. All of these things were reversed within the first few months of Biden's presidency, with a stroke of his pen, with those that were behind him probably influencing him to do these things. All of these things, and we have seen the numbers just skyrocket coming across our borders. Historically, the last, we've had 224,000 in the month of March, 224,000 people being caught crossing our borders, and that's just the people that we've caught. That is a record. That's just crazy, and those are just the ones that we've caught. And the new policies, we just catch and release them unless they're on a terrorist watch list or they're a known criminal. We catch and release them. We bust them or we fly them to cities or places all over this country. That's what the Biden administration is doing. These people are and it's just like, come on over. No. Do I have anything against the illegal immigrants? No. We love people regardless of who they are. They're looking for a better life for the majority of them. But there's people coming from, I think it was 90 to 100 different countries. There's people coming from the Middle East. People that are coming from countries that hate America. People that have been on terrorist watch lists have come over. Drugs pouring over our borders, coming into our communities, causing crime. Now, what do you care? What do you think about these things? Do they matter? Is that going to affect your family at some point? When it continues, and it comes in it may not be affecting your family right now, but what about the people in the border towns? The people in Texas, the people in Arizona, who are seeing the drugs just pour in. They're seeing this influx of people that are we've been told COVID is the worst thing in the world, but these people are not vaccinated as far as we know. There's no way to test it. They're not enforcing any of that. It's such a double standard. You have crime, you have drugs, you have all of these things. What do you care? Do you care about these things? Are you going to care? And I can guarantee you that the people that are being affected in these border towns care when it affects their families, when their kids are going to schools and the drugs are being introduced. I can guarantee you that. Are you going to care when it comes to your schools, to your families, to your town? Is that when you're going to start caring? It might be too late. What about runaway inflation? We have a president who has spent so much money and put our nation into inflation, whose economic policy has been a disaster. And we were energy independent. And he, in his first day in office, he canceled all of our federal land leases for oil. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline. He severely limited fracking, which is a huge business. We were basically the #1 nation for oil and for natural gas in the world at that time. Trump had opened up everything. He shut it down. And then we get in a war. Then we get in a Cold War with Russia, trying to help Ukraine. And we have to cut off some of our dependence on Russia. And that even hurts us even more because we put ourselves in that situation. That's about national security at some point. That's, and now what do you think about the president going to the dictator of Venezuela to beg him for oil, going to Saudi Arabia, going to these countries that really hate us, that really are not our friends by any stretch of the imagination, trying to work out some Iran deal so that we can get oil through it. Iran says death to America. These are countries that do not like us or hate us. And we are going to them to try to fix our oil problem that we didn't even have a few months, just in the last administration. But because we're stupid and we say, well, the environment is somehow being destroyed when the environment the oil is still going to be used from somewhere. So it's going to hurt the environment in some other country that's pumping it if we're not pumping it. So, try to figure that one out. There's just no common sense. Do you care about these things? You're paying more. Your children are going to be paying more. We're going into more debt with this inflation. What about crime? Look at these cities. Maybe it's not affected your city yet because you don't live in a far-left, big Democrat city, but there's cities like New York City, cities on the West Coast that are saying, doing away with bail. So someone can go to jail for even some violent crimes and be right back out on the streets. And they're recommitting these crimes. They're redoing these crimes. The attack on the police. Defunding some of the police in some of these cities. That's just a message being sent to the criminals to go out and do what you want. And you can get away with it. And it's exactly what they're doing. Do you care about that? We talk about love your neighbor, right? We talk about love your neighbor. Are you loving your neighbor? Do you by not caring about these things happening and not speaking out against these things? Because loving our neighbor should be doing what's best and beneficial for our neighbors who are victims of all of these things, right? That's our neighbors. What about weakness on the world stage? Look at how President Biden has handled the whole thing with Russia. You want to talk about weakness? You want to talk when he's begging dictators for oil. You want to talk about weakness? Are we leading the world? Are we showing that we're strong? No, we're not. And that is a place that our enemies will take advantage of. President Reagan had a great foreign policy in 3 words: peace through strength. And Trump carried that on. Peace through strength. That doesn't mean we have to be involved in every nation building or problem between countries in the world. No, absolutely not. But what that means is we show that when you cross a line with us, we're going to come in strong, and we're going to take a position of strength, and we're going to have a strong military. We're going to build that up. Obama just basically let our military go to pot. Biden's doing the same thing. President Trump built it back up because he believed in peace through strength. Biden is showing weakness to Putin, to these dictators, to China. It's appalling. It's appalling. And these things threaten our we've had Russia threaten nuclear war. I mean, if anything like that were to ever, God forbid, would ever to happen, do you trust this president? Do you trust this administration to take a strong stance and to fight back and to defend our people, defend our country, and to show strength back? I don't. Frankly, I don't. And our families' lives are at stake. We're talking about things like that. Do you care? What do you think about a president who is corrupt, who is morally and cognitively unfit to be the president of the United States? I'm not even talking about the election or whether that was rigged or whatever. We can go on and on about that. I am talking about a president that we know that was on video over and over and over again. They had a problem with young girls and women sniffing their hair and touching them on the shoulders and the hair. And I mean, so many Christians even were just so anti-Trump and would say, oh, Trump's like, oh, he was, he had this prostitute, or at some point he's on his how many wife, he made this perverted statement in the past back in 2007 or whatever it was, and Trump's just this morally inept or corrupt person. You could absolutely make a case for it, of course, but are we getting our priorities mixed up here? Biden, I'd never heard the criticism from the same people on Biden. Why are we just ignoring that? And this guy, so he's morally corrupt, but he's also cognitively. I mean, this guy was just had a speech where right after his speech he turns around and he shakes hands with nobody. He shakes hands in midair. He's shaking hands with a ghost, and then he turns around to the flag and starts shaking hands as if that's a person. This guy is completely unfit, and we knew that. We saw the signs, right? But we still voted for him. And we still, if you're a Christian, hopefully you didn't vote for this guy. But many Christians were silent because they didn't want to cause disunity with their other brothers and sisters in Christ. Maybe they voted for Trump, but they didn't want to cause disunity, so they didn't want to bring any of it up. They didn't want to make an issue of it. I think at some point it's going to be time to make an issue of it. Then there's other Christians who would just attack Trump and nonstop, like he's the worst thing, and as if you're afraid that we're all just going to worship this guy, and that's not what's happening. We're looking at the big picture. What did Trump do as president? He did a lot of good things, including being the most pro-life president, taking the strongest pro-life stance in history. Whatever you have bad to say about him, he was that. And his policies were sound, they were conservative, they were from a place of strength and caring about people, and the American people, first and foremost, which we should. I can go on and on. CRT and sexual perversion being taught in our schools. What do you care? Do you care about that? No, you say, well, CRT, that's just, we're sometimes people misunderstand that, and that's just, no. CRT is dividing people based on race, and is saying that, they're talking about white privilege and people are inherently racist and all of these things. It's like systemically throughout this country. All of these points go together with CRT, social justice, and it's being taught in our schools, and it's in the name of unity. We're accepting it, but it's actually divisive, and it's dividing people. I'm sorry. I am very, very, I'm fed up with what's going on in this country, and we need to be on the same page if we know Christ, if we care about the truth. You see, our God, you say, well, God's not about politics, God is way above that. Yes, he's way above that, but our God is about righteous politics. He's going to rule and reign on this earth with a rod of iron, right? He believes in the rule of law, and our God is about righteousness being enacted. And our God is about being salt and light, us being salt and light of the truth, preserving what is right in society, to be a testimony of what God says is right and wrong, so that people would be drawn to repentance, to see their need of a Savior. And so it all goes together with God's character. So yeah, God's about politics. God's about, and especially in our country, we as the people have a responsibility to be involved in politics. We are the ones that send the people to their political positions. Are we going to throw up our hands and say, oh, it's just politics? Are we going to say, oh, so they're just corrupt? Well, there's a whole lot of corruption in politics and with politicians. But we don't just give up. Not when our country, the other side's not giving up. Not when our country's being taken from within. And all along, through this whole thing, through all of these things that have been happening in the last few years, we still have millions and millions of babies. And this is last but definitely not least. Probably this is the number one issue. We have millions of babies continually being murdered in their mother's wombs. We care. We're supposed to care about justice. What about this? When's been the last time that you have spoken out publicly about abortion? We can talk about whether how bad racial issues are in this country, but I'm sorry. I believe racism is evil, but there is something that is more evil and more pressing that we need to deal with. There's a priority list here. And babies being murdered is as far up, is all the way at the top. When do we start talking about this again? When do we start caring about this? And when do we start just being honest that one party is absolutely in the tank for murdering babies? Almost universally, you can take just about any Democrat on the national stage, or many far majority of state Democrats, and they're pro-choice. And many of them are radically pro-choice for all 9 months of pregnancy. Do we care? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with a president appointing a justice that considers herself an advocate for women's rights, women's reproductive rights, for abortion? This Ketanji Brown or whatever, aside from the fact that she's it's historical that she's the first black, female appointed to the Supreme Court. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, her policy, how she's going to rule, what she thinks about the Constitution, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what color you are, I know somebody on the ERLC made a statement in the Southern Baptist Convention, my own denomination, on the ERLC, Evangelical and Religious Liberty Council, came out and made the statement that, aside from her politics or whatever, I'm paraphrasing, but this is, we need to recognize that this is a historic day for black females being appointed to the Supreme Court. This is, like it's a good thing in some sense. Are you serious? This woman can't even define what a woman is. This woman is a far leftist that's been appointed again by a Democrat president because people would not vote Republican, to be quite honest, to be quite blunt about it. Because everybody had such a problem with President Trump. I'm sorry, not everyone. I'm in circles where there's a number of loud voices that I believe you aided and abetted this to happen, because I don't know what your excuse is, but I do know this. I do know that this country is being destroyed because we didn't like tweets, we didn't like a personality, we thought this person was too immoral, but we failed to look at the big picture. We failed to realize, we failed to admit, we failed to have the humility to admit that there was one of these guys, that President Trump was far superior to a Biden presidency, and that if we allowed a Biden presidency, we would have a destruction of freedom and human rights and just everything. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening right before our eyes. And I don't want to be bitter, but and it's hard sometimes. I'll be honest with you. We all have blind spots. But my challenge to you is get off your blind spot. Consider it. Look at it. Say, have I not looked at the big picture? Have I been so honed in on how, like, I see certain people so excited about Trump and they can't see him do anything wrong, and they just worship the guy? Yeah, there's people out there like that. There's a few. Most of those people probably aren't even Christians or aren't serious Christians. But how many serious Christians are worshiping President Trump? I don't know of any. How many serious Christians don't criticize him when they see him do something? I don't know of any. I criticize him. I've criticized him. But the difference between the two were just absolutely staggering. And we knew it going in. That's the thing, is we knew it going in. But we're going to attack. The more you add your voice to attacking one candidate, it's going to help the other candidate. It's just how it works. And we hear so much about loving your neighbor. Do you love your neighbor? Do you love your neighbor when drugs are pouring into your communities? Do you love your neighbor? All these people that are being trafficked because you won't speak out against the Democrat Party, to be blunt. I mean, do you love your neighbor? With everything that is going on with the energy crisis, like what inflation that is affecting people everywhere. Do you love your neighbor by aiding and abetting these policies, these Democrat policies? Do you love your neighbor? Like, who's your neighbor? Who's your neighbor? It's everybody, but what is the truth about what's going to affect them? What's the truth about what's going to be beneficial for the neighbor? Is wearing a mask all the time, is that literally, do you think that is, and saying, unifying words about their politics as much as you can, and sounding like you agree with them as much as you can, is that loving your neighbor instead of actually speaking what is really true and voting in policies that are really going to help them, whether they believe that or not? It really, I think we ought to love our neighbors, and that means love our families too, right? So what happens, let's get to talking about our families. What happens when these things come to our door? What happens when your family is directly affected by these things? It could be your child is taught something in school that is just disgusting, under the guise of CRT or sexual gender, diversity, whatever you want to call it. What happens when you have to have conversations with your children that you shouldn't have had to have until they were teenagers? What happens when family members who are living in cities get caught in crossfires from drug cartels and because drugs are pouring in? What happens when crime is increasing so much that there are more home invasions? And God forbid I'm not saying this happens all the time. What happens when someone enters your home? Are you going to care at that point? Are you going to stop them? Or are you going to just say God is in control? Are you going to do something about it? What happens? Do you ignore the robber coming into your home? Well, are you ignoring the robber, the evil, coming into our country? I'm not talking about just illegal immigrants that are criminals, which by far they're not all criminals. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking, there's terrorists that are coming into this country. What happens when, I'll just say, what happens when they set off a terrorist attack and your family, God forbid, but your family is affected or injured in that situation? What happens? What are you going to care then about politics? Is politics now going to be taken off the dirty word list? God, I hope that's the case. I pray to God that you wake up and realize if you don't care about your country, if your head is in the sand now and you just don't want to cause disunity, so you refuse to speak and you actually want to, like virtue signal to the other side just to sow as much unity as you can, because we need to be united. We need to show the love of Christ so much to the world that they think that we love them, and that that's what it's all about. But that's not gonna lead them to the truth. I'm just absolutely convinced of it. What happens? Are you going to start speaking out? Is it going to have to actually happen to your family before you care, before you start speaking out, before you start saying, oh, I guess I'm going to have to vote for the right person, the person on the right? I'll just say it that way without mentioning party. I'm going to have to vote for the person on the right that's the only one that has the chance of beating the person on the left, because they're the person that believes in law and order. They're the person that believes in protecting our country. I guess I'm going to have to do that, and I guess I'm going to have to stop talking against them. I guess I'm going to have to start speaking for the issues that matter to protect our country, and they happen to be on the right. They are on the right. So my challenge to you today is not just all of these questions, to consider these things. So my final question, final question I have on those questions is your head in the sand? Are you truly loving your neighbor? Are you truly looking out for your family? And are you loving your neighbor? Are you loving those that are the victims of all of this leftist nonsense? Or is your head in the sand? And just for the sake of unity, for the sake of peace. And my challenge with all of that under consideration is, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? I fall short myself. I know I do. We all fall short in some ways. Nobody's perfect, right? We could be, some of us are more about focusing on going out and doing something, being involved in a protest, voting, like writing to our congressman, letting our voice be heard out on social media. Some of us are more involved that way. Some of us are more involved in praying. I fall short more in prayer. I do pray. I pray. It's more when it starts to accumulate, become a real weight on my heart. I start praying. I should pray every day. But are you praying? Are you praying consistently for your country, for your family, for evil to be exposed, for truth to triumph? Are you praying? But also, are you putting feet to those prayers? Like, if you believe so much that you should pray, absolutely. But are you putting feet to those prayers and at least voting for the right people? Are you at least speaking out when you have the opportunity? It doesn't mean you have to always do that. Some people are more gifted and have more of a passion and more of a call, you could say, for that. But there's times when we all need to speak out, right? There's times that, enough is enough for everybody, and we need to speak out. But are you on the right side? Are you moving the needle to the right? Are you moving the needle to the correct direction, towards morality, the rule of law, towards, keeping America true to its Constitution? Are you pushing the needle in that direction, or are you pushing the needle by your words and by your embracing so much the causes that you can on the left? You might consider yourself a moderate. You might be more of a moderate. You might still be conservative on abortion, transgender, all that stuff. But when it comes to legal immigration and it comes to, believing in, like social justice, you're going to the left. Like, you're kind of in between. You might consider yourself a moderate, but you really, by your words and actions, you're pushing the needle to the left. Which direction are you pushing it? Because your family is at stake. My family is at stake. Now, I want to address one thing. Because I think this is probably a question that, and maybe a rebuttal, if you will, or some challenge that someone would give back to this, is they would say, God is in control. I am not going to fear. We're not supposed to fear. We're supposed to trust God because He is in control. Okay. I would say absolutely yes, but that is when that is used in the realm of politics to just ignore what's going on or not care, or actually push the needle in the other way subtly, that truth is being abused, absolutely abused, and I don't even like to hear that anymore in the realm of politics. Don't come to me when we're talking about politics and say God is in control. Don't unless you believe the same way I do, unless you're speaking out, unless you're you care about all these things that are happening, and you're doing something about it. But don't come to me and say, oh, God is in control. We're not supposed to fear. Absolutely, we're not supposed to fear. And I'm not coming from a place of fear. I'm coming from a place of deep concern for my country, for my people. I care about people. I have compassion. I care about my family. And I know God's going to be in control. And I'm excited. These are exciting times to live in, absolutely, because it's dynamic. But, fear, this false argument of, well, you're just fearing and you're not trusting God. Well, are you going to say that? Is the cancer patient going to say that? Are you going to say that when you get cancer, and there's something you can do to try to be cured of that cancer? You can have radiation, you can have chemo, and we're like, no, God's in control. I don't really need to do anything about it. If He's the one that unconditionally determines it all. He's got it all figured out exactly how it's all supposed to happen. So I'm just going to sit back and just let happen whatever God wants to happen. No, absolutely, we don't. We do not come at things like that. Now, whether you're a Calvinist or a non-Calvinist, and you believe that, whether you believe that God just unconditionally predetermines everything that's going to happen, and there's nothing that we can do to change it. Our free will is just kind of illusory. I can't even skip that word, but it's just kind of an illusion. Or whether you believe that we have a real part to play and God's ultimate goals are going to happen. He's in control of everything. He can allow things to happen, but he doesn't have to predetermine everything. He can still bring about his ultimate goals and things that he is going to bring it past, that he says and he prophesies about without that. Whether you believe either one, we all can agree that God calls us to be a means to that end, a means to change things. And in America especially, God has given us a nation where we have a voice. It's of the people, by the people, and for the people. We don't just have a voice. We don't just have the First Amendment. We have a vote. And we have the means to put these people and take them out. And it still works. I hope. I hope it still works. But we have a voice. So therefore, since God has given us this, we have a responsibility. Government matters to God. Good government. The Bible says, Romans 13 talks about good. Government was meant to be good for our good. And if government was meant to be good, to protect people from evildoers, is exactly what it's talking about in Romans 13. And we have evildoers running rampant in this country, and we have the ability to do something about that, and we don't. It's on us. It's not on God. Don't put that on God. God doesn't mean that God's perfect will is always done. He can bring about his greater purposes and still be not glorified by evil that is happening because we're allowing it. And we're going to have to answer for those things. What are we doing? What are we doing? And it was... I just want to say, I know that I'm speaking to a lot of people that agree with me, and you're probably like, wow, this guy's... No, it's just weighing on my heart. Just being very real here. I love my country, but even more, I love my family. This country is made up of families. And families are made up of people that matter and we should care about protecting. And I think it's very selfish if in our minds we're thinking, well, that's someone else's family that was affected by that. That's some other town. That's some other community. It hasn't come here yet. It hasn't been taught in my schools yet. When we have that kind of attitude, it's kind of like, it's not just kicking the can down the road and just waiting for it to come to our door, and then we have to force to deal with it, and then we're just like, but it's also it's not loving our neighbor, right? It's not loving our neighbor. So much hypocrisy for those that say love your neighbor when it's all this superficial unity, when the left is running that whole narrative to bring about power, to abuse and oppress more people, more babies, more children being taught evil, more children being confused about their gender by their teachers. It's just absolutely disgusting. When it hits our community and it hits our family, we're going to care. You're going to care. Do you care enough? Now, I'm saying that most of you care because you probably wouldn't be watching this if you didn't. But what else can you do? I mean, just pray, just ask God. You know, can I go to a protest? Can I let my voice be? The more voices that are heard, the better. Or are you just ignoring it because you'd rather just have peace with your brother and sister in Christ, and you know that some disagree with you, and it's just this politics is a dirty word? Well, get rid of that whole mindset. Politics is a real thing that God created. It's real, and it has real consequences. So we have to be involved in it. If we're not involved in it, it's going to be involved with us. So we better take the initiative and make sure that we're having the influence on it that we can have and that we need to have, and that we have a responsibility before God to have. Let's stand up. Let's fear not, but let's fight on for what matters. Our families, our churches, our communities, and our country. Thank you, and God bless.